Desire is the oldest battlefield known to man. Before the wars of empires, before the clash of armies, there was the war inside, between what a man wants and what he knows he must do. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." But what most men never realize is that the greatest outside event they must conquer lies within their own skin. The urges that rise from the body, the hunger that clouds the mind, the invisible pull toward pleasure. This is the empire every man must learn to rule. The Stoics understood that the enemy is rarely out there. It is the whisper within, the craving that makes a man sell his time, his purpose, even his soul for a fleeting moment of satisfaction. Marcus lived in a palace surrounded by temptation, wealth, women, and luxury, yet he saw desire for what it truly was, a test of discipline disguised as delight. The Roman Empire bowed to him, yet he bowed to no craving. He wrote to himself in meditations, reminding his own heart that indulgence is a form of slavery. The man who cannot control his pleasure becomes a servant to it. And in today's world, that servitude is the new normal. Scrolls have become screens, and every image is an invitation to kneel before the false gods of lust and distraction. The modern man wakes up already surrounded by bait, algorithms, fantasies, bodies for sale, validation loops designed to make him forget who he is. He thinks he's free because he can indulge whenever he wants, but he's trapped because he no longer wants what truly frees him. The Stoic path begins with awareness, the painful realization that most of what you chase was placed there to weaken you. Every advertisement, every half-naked image, every like on your feed is engineered to drain the very energy that builds kings. Marcus would call this the corruption of reason, the moment the mind becomes a hostage of the senses. He taught that to live by reason is to live as a man. To live by impulse is to live as an animal. The difference between the two is not strength, it's direction. A lion without focus is dangerous. A man without control is doomed. And yet, most men today confuse indulgence with power, mistaking the surrender of discipline for self-expression. They don't see that pleasure without boundaries becomes poison. There's a story in every man, a time when desire promised him power but left him empty. Maybe it was the woman who consumed his focus, the habit that robbed his mornings, or the addiction that disguised itself as relief. The Stoic would say, that moment was your first lesson. You were being shown how fragile your freedom really was. Every craving that owns you is proof of your captivity. The first step to liberation is observation, to watch the urge rise without obeying it, to see it as smoke, not flame. Marcus taught his soldiers to pause before reaction, to let reason stand guard before emotion. The same principle applies to desire. It must be faced, studied, and ultimately mastered, not feared. Understand. The Stoic path does not demand you reject beauty or pleasure. It demands that you refuse to worship them. The disciplined man doesn't hide from desire. He transforms it. He learns to channel it into strength, creativity, presence. The same fire that drives lust can fuel greatness, but only if it's contained. An uncontrolled flame burns the man who holds it. A controlled one lights the path ahead. Marcus Aurelius would have you ask, does this serve my higher self, or does it enslave me to the lower one? That question separates kings from consumers, warriors from wanderers. We live in an age where restraint is mocked and indulgence is marketed as enlightenment. But the truth hasn't changed since the days of Rome. Every man must decide whether he will be the ruler or the ruled. To follow the Stoic path is to turn inward, to recognize that every lustful thought, every craving, every emotional wave is an opportunity to sharpen your will. Desire is not your enemy, your obedience to it is. The moment you can look temptation in the face and smile, not from suppression, but from understanding, you've taken your first step toward true freedom. The Stoics called this apatheia, not the absence of feeling, but the mastery of it, the calm center that remains unshaken while the world burns with temptation. Marcus found peace not because he escaped his urges, but because he learned to rule over them. The modern man must do the same. He must become the emperor of his own mind, steady, disciplined, and unyielding. For if you cannot control the fire within, the world will use it to burn you alive. You're not lazy, you're hijacked. Every scroll designed to keep you docile, addicted, and distracted. Dopamine warfare, reclaiming the mind. This isn't just about quitting porn or deleting apps. This is about taking back command of your nervous system, your focus, your fire. Control isn't born in comfort. It's forged in confrontation. Marcus Aurelius ruled the largest empire on earth, yet his greatest victories were won in silence, in the unseen battles between impulse and intention. Every morning, before the Senate, before the armies, before the noise of the world, he would write to himself, "At dawn, when you rise unwillingly, have this thought: I am rising to the work of a man." The work of a man, to Marcus, wasn't conquest or politics. It was discipline, mastery of the body through mastery of the mind. The emperor knew what most men today have forgotten. The hardest kingdom to rule is the flesh. Your body is not your enemy, but it must never become your master. Every craving, every urge, every pulse of desire, these are signals, not commands. The average man obeys them blindly, confusing stimulation with strength. But the Stoic sees through the disguise. He knows the body is a wild horse, powerful when guided, destructive when left unchecked. To lead it requires reins made of routine. Marcus believed in ritual, rising early, enduring the cold, studying the self. He trained the mind to command the flesh, not negotiate with it. Because once you start negotiating with your weakness, it wins. Sexual control, to the Stoic, was not abstinence for the sake of denial. It was abstinence for the sake of clarity. Lust, when uncontrolled, clouds the mind and scatters the will. It consumes your focus, your ambition, your time. But when that same energy is redirected, when the flame is focused instead of fanned, it becomes something else entirely. The Stoics didn't call it semen retention. They called it discipline of the passions. The principle is ancient. What you withhold from the lower self becomes power for the higher one. Every man who has ever built an empire, written a legacy, or transformed his life has known this truth. Control the appetite, and you control the outcome. This is the art of transmutation, converting lust into leadership. It is what separates the man who chases pleasure from the man who attracts it naturally. The world says, follow your urges, but the Stoic says, command them. When you transmute that sexual force, you don't become less masculine. You become more dangerous, more composed, more magnetic. Women feel it. The world senses it. You radiate calm, not chaos, direction, not desperation. And that aura, that quiet dominance, can only exist when your energy isn't scattered through screens, lust, and release. Restraint must be ritualized. It can't depend on mood or motivation. The Stoic warrior creates a system that guards his energy like a fortress. Wake early, breathe deep, cold showers to remind you that comfort is optional. Training to discipline the body, silence to discipline the mind, solitude to sharpen focus. These acts aren't random, they are reminders that you are in control. Every act of discipline, no matter how small, reinforces the identity of a man who leads himself. The Stoic doesn't fight urges with emotion, he outlasts them with structure. There is beauty in restraint. The same way a dam turns a wild river into electricity, restraint turns chaos into creation. The world fears the disciplined man because he cannot be manipulated. He's not swayed by temptation, not enslaved by dopamine. He holds his seed, his words, his emotions, and releases them only with intention. Marcus wrote that, "Nothing that belongs to you is truly lost unless you surrender it willingly." The modern man loses everything, energy, time, peace, because he gives it away freely. The Stoic gives nothing without purpose. He decides when to speak, when to act, when to release, and when to wait. That control builds an aura that money, looks, or status can't replicate. Abstinence without purpose becomes starvation. It turns you bitter, rigid, lifeless. But abstinence with purpose becomes transformation. You don't withdraw from the world, you withdraw from weakness. You're not running from pleasure, you're preparing to enjoy it consciously, not compulsively. There's a difference between a man who takes pleasure as a king and a man who begs for it like a slave. The former chooses when and how, the latter obeys whenever it calls. Marcus Aurelius understood this, and that's why he could sit atop the Roman throne and still live with the simplicity of a monk. True mastery begins when your habits serve your mission. The Stoic path is not repression, it's redirection. When you master restraint, you gain time, energy, and focus. You walk into rooms differently. You speak slower, move calmer, think clearer. You become a man that cannot be hurried, cannot be shaken. That is the emperor's discipline. Self-command so complete that the world's noise can't touch it. For the man who conquers his body has already conquered the battlefield of life. What if everything you chase is what's weakening you? What if pleasure isn't reward, but a trap? And what if desire itself was the enemy all along? Death of desire, the Stoic's path to cold clarity. This is not a guide. This is not self-help. This is war. Kill the need, master the mind. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire in the world, yet his journals were filled not with pride, but with reminders to stay humble, focused, and uncorrupted by pleasure. He wrote, "It is not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to live." To the Stoic, living meant more than breathing. It meant mastering one's nature, rising above instinct, and living by principle, not impulse. Lust, in this sense, was never just about women or pleasure. It was about what you give up in exchange for them. Every time you lose control to desire, you trade a piece of your legacy for a moment of comfort. And the Stoic man, the Indecepta man, understands that comfort is the most seductive form of decay. The true conquest of desire is not abstinence, it's liberation. When you no longer chase what you can command, you've crossed into a higher tier of existence. Marcus ruled Rome, but his real empire was internal. He could have taken every indulgence life offered, yet he often wrote from tents, slept on hard floors, and lived simply. Why? Because he understood that indulgence breeds weakness, and weakness makes slaves of kings. The world today reverses this truth. It glorifies indulgence and mocks restraint. But the Stoic smiles quietly, because he knows something the world forgot. What you deny yourself today becomes your power tomorrow. Lust is not the enemy. Dependence on lust is. When you need it to feel alive, you've already surrendered your crown. The Stoics' path to sexual control is not about denying pleasure, but dethroning it, placing it back in its proper order beneath purpose, discipline, and reason. Pleasure was made to serve the man, not the other way around. A man ruled by desire spends his life reacting. A man who has mastered it lives his life directing. The difference between the two is legacy. One burns out in lust, the other burns through history. Ask yourself, what story will your life tell? Will it be one of scattered energy, wasted potential, and impulsive choices? Or will it be one of control, power, and intention? Every great empire was built on delayed gratification, the willingness to suffer now for a greater reward later. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." The same applies to desire. If it doesn't serve your mission, it doesn't deserve your energy. Every release should have purpose. Every pleasure should be earned. Every indulgence should serve growth, not guilt. The Stoic warrior doesn't hide from the world's pleasures. He engages with them from a place of sovereignty. He can taste without addiction, touch without attachment, love without losing himself. That is ultimate control. Because when you've disciplined your body and your mind, desire becomes a tool, not a trap. The energy that once ruled you now fuels your purpose. You no longer chase validation through lust. You command respect through your presence. That is what Marcus meant by living according to nature, not being enslaved by nature, but aligned with it. Legacy is the final reward of restraint. When your daily choices are governed by reason, your life becomes an example. People may not know the battles you fight in silence, but they feel your aura. They see the calm in your eyes, the steadiness in your voice, the absence of desperation. You become the man others turn to when chaos reigns, because you've already conquered the chaos within. Lust is no longer your master. It's your reminder that power must always be guarded. The Stoic doesn't reject pleasure. He simply refuses to worship it. He knows that every temptation is a test of alignment. Will you choose the moment or the mission, the instant or the immortal? The man who chooses wisely leaves a mark the world cannot erase. Marcus Aurelius didn't write for fame. He wrote to discipline his own soul. Yet centuries later, his words still command respect, because mastery never dies. In the end, sexual control is not about suppressing desire, it's about transcending it. It's about becoming so disciplined, so present, that your energy no longer leaks through lust, but radiates through purpose. The Stoic path doesn't ask you to be less human. It demands you become the highest version of it. You don't destroy the fire. You learn to contain it until it forges steel. You don't run from the urge, you ride it into greatness. That is the Stoic path to sexual control, to rise above the animal within and become the emperor of your own empire. Because in the end, the man who conquers his desire conquers all. Thus remember, we are Indecepta. Becoming Indecepta is the code they never wanted you to learn. A psychological war map for men, forbidden teachings fused with modern strategy for influence, dominance, and self-mastery. If you want peace, prepare for war. The Crusaders Bundle. 4 ruthless lessons. 1 unbreakable code. For a limited time, claim all 4 Indecepta audiobooks for the price of 3. Step inside the private archive of discipline, power, and psychological warfare, where lust is conquered, the mind is weaponized, and legacy is forged. Don't just listen. Arm yourself. Indeceptions.com